So today we're here to talk about mixed time series charts. Pretty cool viz type in Superset, which lets you do a lot of kind of different types of comparisons. So here's kind of a quick schedule. This will be a shorter event. So I'm targeting about 30 to 35 minutes. I know some people have been here in the past and have gone the full hour. We're kind of experimenting with shorter workshops to take up less time and also just as an experiment, just to see if people get value and are learning something in 30 minutes. Then we can do more of them. So a quick schedule today. So quick overview of Superset. This is my classic intro. It'll be short for people who've heard my spiel before, but I always like to give it because not everyone has used Superset before. I'll talk a little bit about time series visualization in general, and as well as talk about the Apache ECharts migration, which has been ongoing for a while now. Then I'll talk about the star of the show, which is mixed time series charts, how they work, and go through some very concrete examples. And I'll also kind of talk about some use cases. So how do you actually use this effectively? So as a reminder, there is a Q&A tab at the bottom. I will check it at the end, and we will have Q&A at the end as well. So quickly about me. So my name is Srini. I'm based in Boston. I'm a committer and PMC member to Apache Superset. I also help lead our developer relations efforts at Preset. We're one of the main kind of contributors to the Superset project. And before joining Preset, I spent 7 years working with data and educating others. So teaching and kind of building skills around data is one of my passions. So that's one of the reasons why I like doing these type of workshops and like to share what I've learned. So quick intro to Superset. Superset is a modern open source BI platform. Works with nearly any SQL speaking engine. So if it speaks SQL, then there's a path to having it be queryable in Superset, and large diversity of chart types. So Superset ships with over 60 chart types out of the box. And you can also add your own if you are experienced with front-end development and visualization development. You can also add your own plugins to your Superset deployment, which is also cool. So it's still, I think, currently the most popular open source BI tool out there. There's a few others, but I think we've, in terms of GitHub stars, the Superset project has been staying strong at number one, at least in this kind of subdomain. So that's been cool to see. I'm hoping we'll hit about 50K stars in about a month or two. I think we're like at 46,000 right now. So they're vanity metrics, but still something cool. So Superset was originally started when Max and his team were having frustrations with Tableau at the time. They were using databases and data systems like Druid and Presto, and at that time, Druid didn't speak SQL. Tableau could not query Druid in any way. And so that's what kind of encouraged him and his team to create this tool. And at that time, in the beginning, Superset only worked with Druid. It spoke directly to it through the API. And Druid has always been kind of known for the slice and dice kind of time series use case. So the roots of the Superset project are very much in slice and dice analytics. Kind of time plays a really, really big component in Superset. And I think compared to some of the other types of charts, time series has always been very strong in Superset in terms of visualization. And related to that is the migration to Apache ECharts. So Apache ECharts is another top-level project. I encourage everyone here to check it out. It's pretty cool. Just going to the Apache ECharts website even and seeing just the large volume of examples. ECharts is similar to D3, but it's kind of one level higher. It is a declarative. It uses declarative viz grammar. So people who have used Altair or Vega or Vega Lite, they should be right at home with ECharts. And this type of declarative viz grammar is actually really valuable for BI tools because BI tools are translating SQL and taking the results of that and then populating charts. So having to kind of manually fiddle with low-level viz code is kind of sometimes a little too much. You just end up with a lot of code. So if you can instead just generate a viz grammar and have that work, then that kind of works really well. So the transition has been going well. I think probably about 30% of the charts now have been rewritten for ECharts. These are the most relevant charts as they relate to time series. So for people who remember last year, there was a single chart called time series chart. and that was let you switch between these different types. So that was kind of a prototype, and now they have been separated into their own standalone visualization plugins. And when you're in the gallery picker in Superset, you'll see these different types. You'll also see the old ones, like you'll see time series bar chart in your own Superset deployment. You can definitely just disable it by removing the Viz plugin. And I think there's one setting in a config file you also need to remove. And then you will only, that way if you want to kind of only keep the eCharts versions of these time series charts available to your end users, you can do that pretty easily as well. If you want to learn more about this, you can check out, there's a blog post I wrote, linked here, or just go to preset.io/blog and look for the blog post about eCharts to learn more. And so when the community was moving over to eCharts, time series were the first ones to go. So they've been well supported for a while. So now for the star of the workshop, mixed time series charts. So what does this mean? Or like, why do we care? Why do we want mixed time series charts? Why combine charts? And fundamentally, visualization is about comparison. I think if you really think about what the purpose is, like why not show a data table? Why actually show a chart or show multiple charts? It's really about comparisons. We want to use our human eyes to compare values and use that to gain insights. And that's really key. And so in many ways, a mixed time series chart builds on that idea by letting you take multiple charts and basically kind of allowing you to multiply and expand the range, expand the canvas of the types of comparisons that you can make. So kind of a classic quote by Edward Tufte, who's kind of one of the informal godfathers of the data viz field. If you haven't heard of him or read his books, I highly recommend them. They're a bit dated at this point, but honestly, they're actually really nice coffee table books to just own. And they're all color, so pretty cool as well. So he has a quote, visual displays, if they are to assist thinking, should show comparisons. And I think I completely agree with this. If you look at some of the most powerful visualizations, they fundamentally come down to some type of comparison. So before I go into use cases, how does this actually work, right? Because for people who've been using Superset for a long time, this is a bit of a strange idea, because in Superset, everything is one-to-one. When you have a query that's generated in Explorer, it's one-to-one mapped to a chart that you may publish in a dashboard or just keep just kind of as a standalone chart. And so how do you kind of combine charts? And there's a number of different ways this could be implemented. You can imagine having kind of a single query that's generated that just like builds towards a more complicated. You can have like a very complicated select and group bys that are built up in Explore. In this case, to kind of keep things simple and cleanly separated, the core contributors have opted to just generate two queries and literally have two kind of different panels, which I'll show in just a second. And then the question is, how do you have two queries but still kind of visualized on the same grid, on the same actual chart container? And the way this is accomplished is by having a shared time dimension, right? There's a reason why it's called mixed time series chart and not mixed chart. It's because this currently does not work for any two arbitrary charts. You cannot combine a pie chart with a line chart. You probably shouldn't do that anyway, but you definitely can't do it in a single chart container. And one of the key things there is there's no shared kind of axis, basically. And so the nice thing about time series is time is always the shared dimension, right? Like you're always going to have x-axis be time. So then you just need to have the chart UI, the Explorer UI for mixed time series charts also reflect that. And so what you'll see in a second when I show it in Superset is that you'll have while you have query A and query B right here as separate drop downs in Explorer, the time column, time grain, and time range is actually defined right up front in this chart type, and it's shared across both charts. And so this is how you're able to get a superset to query data, generate the results, and overlay it on the same chart. It's because they're sharing the same granularity, same time column, and the same time range. So there's a really key idea. It's a little bit of a wonky idea. It's the only chart that does this, really. And actually, if you click View Query, you'll see two queries generated. So that's kind of the key kind of mental model to kind of take on first. So the first use case. So why mix time series charts? Like what's kind of, what's a tangible use case? So a really straightforward one is comparing a subset with the full population. And so what do I mean by that, right? So here we have an example. We have a chart on the left, which is DAUs, daily active users. On the right, we have total members. We want to understand what's the proportion of members that are active on a daily basis. Now you could say, why not just visualize the proportion and watch that change over time? What's the big deal? The thing though is that there's trade-offs. Whenever you're calculating a proportion or you're over aggregating, you are losing some granularity, right? So for example, in this case, if you just look at the proportion of proportion of total members that are active daily, you kind of have just a simple ratio. It might be 30% or 35%, but at the same time, the total members is actually increasing, right? Like, and you can imagine, like, you do some campaign and total members increases from 300 to 600, but your proportion may double, and you might think, oh, I'm doing something awesome, right? But really what happened is it's a denominator change. The total number of members changed, right? And so there's actually a lot of value in still preserving more granular daily data, but at the same time, you do want to do this higher level insight. And so what this looks like right now, if you wanted to preserve both views of data, you wanted to understand daily active users while total members is actually slightly increasing over time, you right now in this configuration, you have to do a very manual one-to-one comparison. So I'll show what that looks like in Superset. So here I have to look at, all right, January 2nd, 60 members, 291, that's like about 1/5, right? And then you kind of have to see like, okay, how many other days is there 1/5? Okay, these days it's like a little bit more than 1/5. And then you can imagine if this chart is changing even more quickly, right? It's going from 300 to 400 within a few days. It's just kind of a lot to keep track of, and you're kind of stuck doing these very much one-to-one pairwise comparisons. And if the goal of visualization is to facilitate comparison, why add new blockers, right? Why add friction to actually doing the type of comparison that you want people to do? So I think if you're creating a dashboard, if you're the dashboard designer, you should always be thinking about how do you facilitate the right type of comparisons and how do you encourage people to actually make them and not get in the way. So the natural kind of solution to this is to combine these charts. And so in this case, we're using a mixed time series chart to showcase. So you get all the information I talked about earlier, right? You get to understand how total members is changing. And alongside that, you're able to understand how daily active users is kind of staying with it or not staying with it, right? We would kind of imagine, like we're able to kind of do this visual using our eyes just by kind of invisibly measuring the gap between this bar chart and this line chart. We're able to kind of estimate visually the proportion. We're able to kind of understand that, you might do some heuristics like, oh, if it's 100, that's like about a third, right? So you can kind of quickly understand how many days it's getting to 1/3 daily active users versus not. And so at the same time, you can also see the dips. Like if we just showed the proportion, the dips would be large, but also kind of devoid of context. You would just see 5%, and then you wouldn't actually know how many members that is. In this case, we're able to kind of do the proportion visually, but still preserve the actual day-by-day insight. We're still able to see the trend. So what this looks like in Superset is actually this. Let me refresh this. Sometimes the charts don't expand the full canvas. So if we refresh it, now it should work. And so here, now when we're kind of thumbing our hand, so to speak, our virtual hand over the data, we're able to do pairwise comparisons easily, right? We can immediately go, what happened on February 22nd? And we can just go right there. Instead of looking at two different charts and kind of doing that comparison, we can just look at the same chart. And we can also kind of visually understand, are we kind of under 1/3? Like, yeah, we definitely are. This feels more like 5% or 10%. And so you can kind of ask new questions and answer them visually in a very compact space. I think that's very powerful, because the other thing you could do, someone might suggest, why not put a table underneath? That way you can do this type of three-way comparison. But again, it's all a barrier, right? If you want to encourage comparison, you want to remove barriers. So that's a very simple use case. Here's another one. So in Superset, you can do things like rolling means. So I'll show what that looks like. If we go here without the mixed chart, so this is daily active user rolling mean. So a common, if you show a lot of people this chart, the first thing people will say is, this chart is too noisy, right? Like we have obvious dips on things like weekends, and then obviously in the middle of the week, it kind of peaks. And so we want to smooth it out. I want to understand how we're trending. I want to understand how daily active users is trending without looking at weekly active user, because again, that's one level up in aggregation. You lose a lot of fidelity when you go straight to WAUs. You actually do want to you want to estimate weekly active users, but you want to maintain the granularity still of daily. So one way to do this is to do something called the rolling mean. The way this works is you're looking at the last 7 days. So every data point here is the last 7 days and then averaged and visualized here. So every single point is doing a 7-day look back window. And so this kind of smooths out this roller coaster of a bar chart into something a bit, smoother, right? This looks more like a natural trend chart than we might see. Whenever, you can tell when a journalist or like a news publication is on top of their game when they show things like daily COVID deaths or cases along with the rolling mean. If they're just showing daily, it's just kind of all over the place to gain a lot of insight, and there's a lot of seasonality as well. And so in this case, a rolling mean helps smooth out the trend. But there's a downside here, which I think you might be able to guess, which is we've lost some granularity, right? So if there's a spike here, and I want to understand what was the last 7 days like, right? Or even something here. So this is kind of a very quick spike right here, or a dip right here. If I want to then reference the relevant data, I'm kind of stuck again, right? Then I have to maintain the separate kind of DAU chart, and then kind of look at like, okay, February 26th, let me go look over here. I actually don't even have February in this chart, so I have to modify the chart. And so this is adding friction, clearly, right? And so the way around this is to overlay them, as you can probably imagine. So in this case, what we're doing is we're actually overlaying the rolling mean along with the daily active users. So if we go over here, you'll see this chart right here. In this case, we're able to do this type of comparison. We can understand when there's a spike up here, a very small spike, and when you're looking at a lot of data, even these small spikes might be worth investigating if it's very recent or you made an intervention you want to understand. In this case, we're able to kind of see the rolling mean and the trend. We're able to kind of glance at, are things kind of trending in the right direction? But at the same time, we're still preserving the daily granular data, which is important when referencing kind of specific interventions or specific campaigns you may have done and the impact that may or may not have had, right? So we get both views of the data. So now you may be wondering how to actually make this chart. And so I'll show you how to do that. So we go to edit chart. This will open in a new tab. And now I'll kind of walk through how this actually works. So I'm using the Slack exported metrics data. This is actually from the examples that ship with Superset. So everyone here should be able to replicate these charts because they're from a snapshot of the Superset Slack community data, actually, the real data. So you're able to replicate all these charts. It's anonymized and all that, of course. But if you're looking at the exported metrics from the examples data, you can recreate this chart. And it's a really fun data set to work with because it's truly real world. So there's a number of columns here. We've made this calculated column called new metrics, which kind of it applies a window function because the raw data doesn't have new members. It has I think it just has the daily number of members or daily total members. So if we wanted to understand the delta in each day, I had to kind of write a quick window function there. So here in this case, you'll notice the mixed time series chart, right? So the same gallery picker that everyone is used to. You just search for mixed and you will find it, right? Mixed chart. We should probably call this mixed time series chart. So that's a note for ourselves. Here we're picking the time columns. You'll notice as I collapse this, that both of these queries do not have their own time kind of box here. You pick a shared time column, grain, and range, as I mentioned earlier. In this case, you put the shared query fields, and then you have query A and query B, right? So in query A, you basically, it doesn't matter which one you do. There's no difference it doesn't matter if you put one chart first and one chart the other. In this case, let's do the 7-day rolling mean first. And the way to actually do this is I just did, this is actually in editing. So by default, you can either do, because in Superset you have to apply an aggregate. It's kind of one of the design philosophies. It applies a date trunk function. Sorry, actually it applies a aggregate in your select rather, and then that maps to the date trunk here. So even if your data is already pre-aggregated, you still need to pick min or max. And so it doesn't matter because it's day by day. You can pick min or max. It's not going to change it since each row corresponds to a single day. So in this case, I'm doing max and I'm just doing daily active members. And just for people who don't know, you can name this instead of having it say max, all caps, daily active members. You can change the name right here. And so it'll look a little bit nicer when it's on the chart as well. And you hit close. And the question is, how do you get the rolling mean, right? And so the way you get the rolling mean is to use something called advanced analytics. I'm hoping to do an entire blog and event on this because there's a lot of cool things hidden here. But this is a way of doing a rolling window that I talked about earlier, right? So how do you do this 7-day look back period? So there's a few kind of things to consider, and I'll just go through the basics. And again, this could be a whole standalone thing in and of itself, especially with time shift and resample. I'm going to focus on the rolling function. So first you have to decide what do you want to do with this data, right? So if you look back for the last 7 days to calculate a single point, what's the calculation? Do you want to do a mean? Do you want to do a sum? You can also do the standard deviation. You can do a cumulative sum, right? So if you have 7 days of daily new members joining, you may want to do the cumulative sum. You may want to say, like, I just want to see a kind of current tally. I just want to visualize the total number of members at any given day based on the last 7 days. So that's something you can do, right? Or in this case, you can even do kind of a weekly roll-up, right? You can look at the last 7 days and add it up and do a weekly roll-up, which is kind of cool. And in this case, because we want the mean, why do we want the mean? That's also a good question, right? Like if we sum this up, it's not accurate if you think about it, right? So daily active users, these bars represent the number of people that have been active every day, but it's not, they're not unique users in the sense that, you know, if we have 55 users, all 55 of these users could have been active on January 14th as well. So if we sum this up, we are that's a serious error we're making because we'll get a number in the hundreds for total number of active users, and that number might even be more than the total number of users even registered. And the reason is because we're making a conflation here. And so we don't want to do sum because these are day-by-day counts and they're not exclusive. What we want to do is do a mean. That way, that's how you get the smoothness, right? We want to smooth out the kind of large roller coaster variations day over day. And so these are the 3 key fields to focus on. So what is the function? When you look X number of periods back, what function do you want applied to that data to visualize a single point? Second one is periods. So how many periods back do you want to go? Do you want to go back, if you want to do a 30-day rolling mean, for example, right? You would put 30. And the question is, where does day come from? Day comes from here. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a shared time component. This is also kind of inherited and reused in the period as well. So if you want to do let's say you want to do a 30-month rolling window or 30-year rolling window for whatever reason, then you would have to change the time grade as well. So something to keep in mind. And minimum periods. This is an interesting one. This is like, what do you do with the first day? How do you do a 7-day look back sum when you only have 1 day? This is up to you, right? For certain, like if you, like there's some downsides to using this as well. Like if you say like, I want 7 periods, in this case, 7 days. I want 7 days to transpire before I show any rolling sum. And these first 7 days won't have a line chart associated with, right? Because that's the minimum period. It's 7 days. And so it's kind of up to you. It's kind of a design decision. If you feel like your audience will understand that, hey, you know, a 7-day rolling mean after 3 days, you know, it's going to gyrate a lot because it's just a few days of data. It's not all 7. If you feel like your audience will understand that, then keep it. It makes for prettier charts because there's no gaps. If you feel like people will be confused about why do I have a 7-day rolling mean? It's only been 2 days. Remove it. You can change this to 7 instead, and then that'll update it. So that's how you define the first query. And the second query is simple. It's just DAUs. It's just daily active users. This is the bar chart that we started out with. So it's a very simple we're just doing, I think it's either a min or a max. Again, it doesn't matter because it's daily aggregated data anyway. We just pick one, and then we have this chart. And then that generates both queries. The second thing is, if you remember, query A is the rolling mean. And so what we need to do is go to customize and query A. This is where we pick the chart type for each query, right? So for the first one, if we want a line chart showing the 7-day rolling mean, we got to pick line here for query A. And if we want a bar chart for the DAUs, we need to click a bar chart right here. And if you change them, the data changes, right? So if we do line here, we get 2 lines instead. It changes instantly because the data is already calculated. Yeah, we haven't changed anything about the data. And we can flip it. I don't know why you'd want to, because this chart is not that interesting, right? Like, I don't know what type of useful comparison you can really do here, because you want your line chart to be smooth. You want your bar charts to gyrate. That's okay. But so this is kind of inverted, right? So let's go back to what we're actually looking for. Okay, phew, all is good. All is good in the world. And when you're ready to save it, you hit save, you pick your dashboard, etc. Right? So this is that chart, the DAUs with the rolling mean. So that's our second key use case. You have another option. Whoops, I jumped ahead here. You have another option here as well. Instead of showing bar charts, there's a case to be made for picking scatter plots. You have to be careful with scatter plots. Each visualization has its own type of trade-off, right? So in this case, we're doing the rolling mean is a line chart, and then we're showing day-by-day bars. In this case, we're doing the rolling mean still as a line chart. Like a rolling mean, like you probably almost always want to use a line chart or maybe kind of a step chart. But again, line chart's probably the way to go because rolling means are good at showing trends. One of the best ways to show a trend is a line chart by far. In this case, we have a scatter plot. And for certain types of data, I think this can make sense, especially if you have data where the scatter plots are very close to the line. And this is maybe not the best example. This data is not the best example, but I did want to showcase that a scatter plot can also make sense in some cases because you can reference kind of individual data points really quickly. And you can kind of, as your, and they're just less noisy, right? Bar charts, they take up a lot of like data ink, so to speak. Like look how much the bars just dominate this chart, right? And so if you want to do more granular comparisons and you don't want the bars getting in the way, in this case, you can kind of more calmly compare data points. You can kind of browse your finger all over the line and do kind of these visual differences to understand. So the main benefit here is just aesthetics, right? So if you want a cleaner, simpler plot to look at, this is great. If you want to kind of get more serious and you're okay with the kind of dominance of the bar charts, then go with the bar chart. So another interesting, one of the last one I'll talk about is 2 rolling windows. So this isn't really possible right now without a mixed time series chart. So if you wanted to compare 2 different rolling windows, right? So in this case, we're comparing a 7-day rolling mean with a 5-day rolling mean. Why would you want to do this? The main benefit here is this helps us understand the seasonality of weekday versus weekends, right? So obviously the weekdays, there's only 5 of them. So looking at the 5-day rolling mean, we'll be able to preserve the spikes and dips that we would imagine that we see in weekdays. And then there'll be dips in the weekends, right? So with 7-day, if you think about the 7-day rolling mean, which I have right here, we don't really know when the weekend is, right? Like the whole point of a 7-day rolling mean is to calculate the smooth weekly average. So we don't see these kind of weekend dips. So if you want to preserve that, then you can do a 5-day rolling mean instead. And in certain cases, you may want to understand how seasonal, like how important is the weekend, like, you know, versus the weekdays. And so looking at 5-day versus a 7-day rolling mean is a good way to do it. It would be great if we can go one step further and have a third chart here, right? I think people may be thinking like, why not also have a daily bar chart? You know, that's not yet supported, maybe one day. But in this case, we can still do 5-day versus 7-day rolling mean. And we can see the 7-day is smooth, right? Like it's still the same smooth chart that we're seeing, but the seasonality, the weekend versus a weekday seasonality is not hidden. It is exposed here. It's not hiding. And so as you kind of expect, as you would expect, the way to do this essentially boils down to choosing the same options as last time, except changing the period number. So because the time box is shared, we can actually collapse this. We'll collapse the chart type as well. In this case, to generate this chart, we just do a 7-day rolling mean and we do a 5-day rolling mean. The only difference is in the advanced analytics box here. We still do mean, but we do 7 periods instead. In this case, I did choose a minimum period for fun, just to show something a little bit different. In this case, I also did as well, because I do want to be a little bit more precise about the minimum amount of days that have passed before I show this trend. And so here, all I have to do now is change this from 7 to 5, which I did, and that will generate a different data set. And if you look at the query, you'll see both queries here. This is the 5-day rolling mean. So it's basically doing the min that I showed earlier. Min or max doesn't matter, right? Here I do max, here I do min. It's daily data, so it doesn't matter which one you do. The where is going to be the same for both of these. And yeah, so that's basically the main kind of difference between both of these. So comparing rolling means, another powerful use case of mixed time series charts as well. So that's kind of an overview of mixed time series charts. Hope people found it useful. There's a lot of powerful use cases for it. And yeah, definitely if you find kind of new interesting ones, feel free to ping me in the community Slack. I'd love to learn how people are using it. If you want to learn more and get a deep dive, I did write a pretty lengthy post called Mixed Time Series Charts Tutorial on the Preset blog. I think it's the 3rd one on the blog. And I go, if you want specific instructions on how to replicate this, I actually go pretty deep into that. I glossed over some of the details here for the workshop. But if you want like a very specific tutorial, step-by-step, how to recreate every chart that I showcased here, I do that right here and show the result as well. So fun stuff. A few more quick announcements before I kind of head to Q&A. We did launch the new resources page. So this now has, we do blog posts, we have a podcast, which not everyone maybe knows about. We have 2 YouTube channels, we have documentation, we have so many different things, we have events. And so in the past, this was just a drop-down. And so we're excited to announce that we actually created a resources page. So for anyone who's using Superset or Preset, this is a single place to get help and to learn more. So you can click blog, it goes to the blog as you would expect. If you click podcast, it goes to our podcast page. We're about a day away from announcing our next episode, by the way. So stay tuned for that with the DBT folks. We have 2 different YouTube channels. So if you click that, it'll go there, and you see the events that you're used to seeing as well. So short little announcement there. The last quick announcement I wanted to make is if you're not on Preset, definitely check it out. We have a free tier, so anyone can just go take their email, sign up, even invite 5 people to their team, and you can replicate everything I just showcased today, because we ship a small little Postgres database to everyone that has the examples data. So you can replicate everything in this tutorial that I did in this workshop I did just on the free tier alone, which is great. And just last week, we announced our private cloud as well. So for people who don't want to manage Superset anymore, and they want the kind of preset experience, but in their own cloud for privacy and sensitivity and compliance reasons, security reasons, we just announced our managed private cloud. And so we wrote a blog post about this if you want to read it, or you can just head over to this URL as well, and I can show you how to get to it. So you just go to preset, you go to product, you go to manage private cloud, and you can reach out to our team about that. So I hope people find this useful. I'm going to go through the Q&A now. Multizeme asks, which version of Superset is it going to be released with? So I actually covered that in the blog post, which I'll also paste here if people are curious. So this has been in Superset since 1.2, I believe. Yeah, right here. The mixed time series visualization was first released in Superset 1.2, and it's actually been improved significantly since then. So it's been in Superset since 1.2. We're actually, I think the contributors are just about to put 2.0 for a vote. So we've had 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, minor patches to each. And now 2.0 should be out in the next few weeks or so. So it's been around for a long time. So as long as you're on this version, you should be able to access it in your installations. Anonymous attendee asks, I don't see the advanced analytics section in the mixed time series chart in my Superset. I'm not able to create the rolling function overlay in my mixed time series chart. I'm on 1.5. Yeah, great question. I found this out last week, actually. So at preset we run master minus 1 week, and so there's sometimes there are features that are available to anyone who wants to use them, but you need to be on master for that, which is basically the latest kind of version of Superset. Not I shouldn't say version. That's a confusing term. The latest kind of source release, or kind of just kind of the cutting edge version, right? And so it's not a 1.5. You're right. That was missing in the first. So when I said earlier that the mixed time series chart has seen a number of advancements, this was one of them. Advanced analytics was added. So if you're brave, you can upgrade past 1.5. You can kind of clone the Superset code or use the Docker image, the official Docker image, a latest dev. So you need to basically be on the dev release, and then you will have advanced analytics working in mixed time series chart. I think it might be in 2.0, which hopefully the community will release in a few weeks. So if you're very much set on using stable releases, then within a few weeks, once 2.0 is out, you should be able to get access to it. So hope that kind of answers your question. Dharani asked, this is cool. Is there a place where I can find working examples of the various visualization? Yeah, it's a great question. It's been a dream of mine to have example data sets and for each visualization. We don't quite have this yet. I'm hoping we will soon. We do have some documentation. So if you go to docs.preset.io, you can go to exploring your data and Superset. And okay, that did not load, but I thought it would. Data visualization. So for some of them, we have videos and kind of a walkthrough of how to create each one. But the other way you can do it is, I've written a few posts about this. So like, I wrote one post, like 9 new ECharts and Superset visualizations, and I showcased like how do you structure your data for these three. So yeah, I mean, basically my answer is, unfortunately, we don't have it yet. If you search Superset plus the name of the chart, we've done some videos, and so you'll find those on YouTube, like, oh, here's how you make this chart. We don't have it for all of them. If there are charts you're not able to recreate, please message me, and I can put together a short little blog post tutorial to help you out. I know some of them require the data to be specified a certain way, so I'm happy to help with that. So I'm hoping we'll have resources soon. We don't have it right now, unfortunately. Janet asks, are these charts going to be available in Superset? Yep, hopefully I answered it already. So mixed time series has been in Superset since 1.2. Most of the work we do at Preset goes into Superset. The only thing to understand is that we use the absolute latest version of Superset, like literally 1 week old, out of cutting edge, basically the cutting edge version. So it's a little bit scary. Not every organization uses that because things can break. There might be bugs, stuff like that. We have a QA team, and we do all of that. It may or may not make sense for everyone else, but in 2.0, you should see this, or you can switch to the release kind of branch, and you'll be able to get it there too. Santiago asks, is there a chart like a mixed time series chart where you can use 2 different types of charts, but instead of having time, have any column shared with both queries? No, there isn't at the moment. It's not something that exists in Superset right now. I'm hoping eventually it will be added. There's a bunch of design work needed for that. Like, how do you kind of let people pick from, arbitrary columns and granularities and stuff, while still kind of how do you kind of resolve the mismatch in the data? There's some interesting design challenges, right? So like, definitely, like, even you can make that chart and contribute it if you want to. I think the harder part is, how do you make that experience usable? Is still there's still a big design challenge there, because you can imagine having data, like one being time data on the x-axis, one being discrete data. How do you merge those into a single chart container? There's not a clear answer, so it needs more design work, I would say. But yeah, so to answer your question though, we don't have right now. It's not in Superset. But hopefully it will be eventually. So that's all the Q&A I see listed here. If people have more questions, I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes. So please just use the Q&A tab and ask more. Renee asked, do you need to manually change the date columns to use the shared query? I'm not sure I'm following, but yeah, so if you want to maybe clarify, but basically, in Explore, it's a single shared column. So for time, you just pick one time basically. So right now, like it's, if you may be wondering about the data set itself, I think that's a good question. I think it's within one data set. So I don't think right now you cannot take kind of a time series data from one data set and time series data from another and merge them. That's not supported right now because you have to pick a single time column. Time columns are one-to-one unique to each data set. And since you can only pick one right now, that's kind of it. Again, eventually I'm sure this will all be added and expanded, but right now it's one-to-one. So an explore workflow is limited to a single data set at the moment. So people said, thank you. Great. Awesome. I'm glad it was useful. Jessica, thank you so much. I learned a lot. Glad I attended. Jessica asked, there is a way to filter the time axis, a setting on the chart to drag the time to smaller time views. Can you demo that? Yeah, absolutely. That's in Customize. It's a little bit hidden, unfortunately, but it's called data zoom, I believe is the term. And so with this data zoom, this is another cool thing. It's not, I didn't demo it here because it's not really related to mixed time series charts. It's available in all of the ECharts time series charts. The way this works is you basically can zoom the data. It's not gonna re-trigger queries for the data engineers in the audience who may be having headaches and sweats over, is there gonna be a new query generated for each one? It's purely a front end JavaScript thing. And so yeah, this is another cool thing. So this is, even if you save this chart to a dashboard, this data zoom is visible in this chart. It doesn't live outside of that. Like the data zoom won't live in your, it won't live in a dashboard filter or anything like that. Right now, data zoom only lives within this chart container. But yeah, so if you zoom the data, it's a cool, if you enable data zoom, then you can kind of focus in the data more and see some funny results like this too. So it's pretty cool. It works purely on the front end, so you reuse the same data that you've already queried as well. You can also like select. If you're noticing, I'm selecting arbitrary intervals. So yeah, really cool feature. I'm a big fan of data zoom. Okay, so Q&A. Do you happen to know when the drill down feature will be released? I do not, unfortunately. I think it is behind a feature flag. If you want to post in the Slack, I can try to tag someone to get more clarity about it. We have cross filtering enabled in preset because it's behind a feature flag. We've tested it and all that, so we have cross filtering enabled here, and we have drill to detail, I believe, enabled. So if you click here, click drill to detail. You can see just the basic kind of data set behind it. I think drill to detail should be available in bleeding edge master of Superset. So I think that part of the challenge too is that like there's things that have been introduced between 1.5 and 2.0, but you got to be on the latest dev branch. So you might start to see some of these in 2.0 actually, which is pretty exciting. Karen asks, I'd like to display the monthly percentage of change on the same month with the monthly totals. Yeah, I know Karen, you reached out to me about this. Let me investigate separately and get back to you. I'm trying to remember if I've done this monthly percentage of change on the same chart. I mean, actually, in theory, I think you might be able to do that with the mixed time series chart, right? Because, yeah, I need to investigate. I think what you can do is have one chart be the previous month. I'm trying to think. You can have one month be the total, one chart be the monthly total, and one chart be the percentage change of that. I need to, as a bit of a brain twister. Let me play with that and email you about that. I need to confirm before I speak out of term. So let me play with that and I'll get back to you about that. Darnie says, we use Superset and documentation is pretty good. How do I make use of this? Make use of preset docs, you mean, or you mean Superset? So for people who don't know, we have two sets of, or there are two sets of documentation. This is linked to the open source project. Anyone can contribute to this. I've written a lot of this myself, and you know, it's great. And then there's also docs.preset.io. For the preset docs, a lot of it is similar. Like, connecting to a database is going to be similar. The way I would think about it is, for preset, 90% of preset is superset. Like, we're not doing, we don't have a bunch of proprietary stuff or anything like that. So a lot of this will be relevant, right? So if you go read about like dashboard filtering, you read about filter types. In Superset, you may, a while ago you had to enable dashboard native filters. Now dashboard native filters is actually enabled by default for everyone, I believe. And so this documentation is end user documentation, right? So in preset, because we are deploying Superset for you, there won't be much information about deploying Superset, right? Because we're handling it. And so preset docs has lots of great end user documentation. So how do you make charts? How do you build filters? How do you do dependent filters? How do you do parent-child filters? How do you sort filter values, right? These are the types of things that end users who are using the tool care about. And so it's very end user focused documentation. The Superset open source documentation is focused more on developers, DevOps engineers, people deploying Superset. So hopefully that answers your question. Awesome, preset docs, great. All right, I think we're over time. Dharani asked, end user documentation, how do I make use of that? You can use this. So if you go to docs.preset.io, I'll paste the link here. It's completely, it's free. Anyone can use it. It's for end users, so it's less for people deploying Superset, but 90% of this should work in open source Superset as well. So like Jinja templating, there's an entire section on how to use Jinja. All of this will work in Superset as well. Awesome. Looks like I answered your question, Dharani. Great. Well, we're over time a little bit. If people have more questions, feel free to email me. I'm Srini at preset.io, or you can post in the Superset Slack as well. So I hope people find it useful, and I hope you come to the next event. Thanks again, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.